This is a reading from Akita, The Tears and Message of Mary. The Memorable Days. If the weeping of the statue took place 101 times, it was never the same. As for the quantity, they could flow without stopping in abundance, or they might be reduced to 2 or 3 tears. Besides, from this time on, the phenomenon rarely happened when the community was alone in the convent. More often, it happened when there were visitors, that is, in the presence of witnesses from outside, whose observation would be more difficult to consider subjective. Moreover, the moment when the tears would flow was never fixed. They could appear in the middle of the day or during the night, without anyone being able to know in advance. There was always someone to notice the tears, whether adults, children, visitors, or sisters, without any distinction of persons. If one seeks a time when the tears never did occur, perhaps the only exception was the Holy Mass. The Mass is the most sacred liturgical act, central and indispensable in the life of the community. I remember that the tears flowed 2 or 3 times, a little before or after Mass, but otherwise always at different times of the day or night. At the end of this book, we will give a chronological chart of the 101 lacrimations, but perhaps it is fitting here to recount just some of the more special examples. 25th of March, 1979. On March 25th, 1979, tears flowed from the eyes of Mary after breakfast, just before the Eucharistic adoration. These were true streams of tears which covered her face. We never saw them so abundant as at that time. On photos taken at the end of the phenomenon, one still clearly sees the traces. I recall that we interpreted these tears as a sign from heaven in honor of the Annunciation, the feast of that day. The tears flowed abundantly in the following period, and even sometimes several days in a row during the months of May and June. On the last day of July, the statue wept for the 95th time. In this period, the members of the community began to sort of take it for granted. We united to say the rosary in a more distracted way, as if the phenomenon could be seen any old time. Some of the sisters even showed a certain lassitude when told that the statue was crying again while they were absorbed in their work. No one was sheltered from this human tendency to make little of something over a long period, even though it ought to be taken most seriously. Then, after the 31st of July, the phenomenon abruptly stopped. At the approach of autumn, after the heavy heat of summer, pilgrims came to render homage to the miraculous Virgin in ever greater numbers, but none of them could see the tears. Then came winter. Not a single tear flowed from the statue. What did the silence mean? Was it an interruption, or was it the end? I was indeed troubled to find an answer. Towards the end of the year, I received a telephone call, which, to say the least, was surprising. It was MT, director of a television station. He said that he had received a bizarre telephone call from an anonymous person. He said that he had received a bizarre telephone call from an anonymous person advising him, above all, not to speak of the tears of the Virgin of Akita. MT had never heard speak of the tears, and this brief exchange piqued his curiosity. He had called Mr. Yamauchi of the Catholic Graph to ask for more details. After that, he wanted to come in person to learn about it and requested an interview. I was not very happy about furnishing information to the media, but since he said he wanted to know the truth, I could not refuse. 4 persons from this television station arrived on the 6th of December, led by Mr. Yamauchi. They were 2 days later than originally expected, bringing us closer to the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. As we shall see, it proved to be a providential delay. The 6th fell on Thursday evening before the first Friday of the month, which is always preceded in our convent by a night of adoration with sisters taking turns before the Blessed Sacrament. The statue of Our Lady was still in the parlor, next to the chapel, because the second board of inquiry was at work and the matter would still be under ecclesiastical examination, until that commission had made its decision one way or the other, after which the bishop would make a pronouncement. The technicians had brought their material and set up a camera before the statue, regulating it in such a way that it would snap a picture every 6 seconds. and although it was in a room separate from the chapel, the noise of the automatic camera release resounded in the silence of the night. So I decided to postpone the adoration to the following night. Besides, now the night adoration would be a preparation for the Feast of the Immaculate Conception the day following. So to say the camera monopolized the statue until the beginning of Mass the following morning, implacably repeating the same operation hour after hour, but it photographed nothing unusual. The next day, December the 7th, we were requisitioned for an interview, and then a tour of the garden, etc., and our visitors thus used up our time until evening. As night fell, they rested their tired bodies, and we began the night adoration, which had been transferred from the day before. On the 8th of December, a little after midnight, more precisely at 10 minutes after, the telephone rang in my room. The statue had been discovered in tears. I at once called Mr. Yamauchi and his technicians who were sleeping on the first floor, and making sure that they had understood me, I ran to the convent. I had hardly arrived at the statue before the technicians, who had followed close behind, bombarded the statue with their cameras and photographic apparatus. I had to admire the promptitude and dexterity of these picture specialists. Some later said that the first pictures were spoiled because their hands trembled. As usual, we recited the rosary with the pilgrims present, and with our eyes saw the end of the lacrimation. In the morning, the cameramen asked to remain another day, regretting not having placed the camera the previous evening, as they had on the day they arrived. They wanted to try a second time. It was a legitimate request, and I had no objection. So the camera was replaced on the evening of the 8th of December, about 8 o'clock, and the lapse set to snap at regular intervals. It was past 11 o'clock when one of the sisters, kneeling before the statue after a final visit to the Blessed Sacrament, discovered the tears again. Later, the film taken that evening was shown on television throughout all of Japan in the course of a program which proposed to answer the question, lie or reality. Today, this videotape is shown all over the world, and we show it to the pilgrims who come to the convent if they desire to see it. And thus, as we were nearing the very end of this prolonged miracle, it was prolonged in such a way that many, many thousands all over the world have also become witnesses. One can only render thanks to the providence which awaited the Feast of the Immaculate Conception to manifest this prodigy in such a way that it is preserved for the sight of many. Decisive expertise. The feast of August 22nd, 1981, Feast of the Queen of the World, was in the old calendar the Feast of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. There is nothing in particular about the tears which the statue shed that day, but it is fitting that we recall them in order that we may better understand what is to follow. The first scientific analysis which I had requested concerning the tears of January 4th, 1975, had revealed that it was a question of human liquid. However, the presence of human liquids foreign to the statue had created a problem with regard to the ongoing inquiry. It had provoked doubts of some and had poisoned the argument. I therefore was looking for an occasion to gather the liquids with extreme care to avoid all impurity. On that day I took immense precautions. Taking a new morsel of cotton with tweezers, I made a ball about as large as an apricot seed. Then I carried it beneath the wooden chin where a drop was clinging, and after having absorbed it in the cotton, I put it into a sack of new vinyl. The afternoon of the same day, I took it to the University of Akita. The analysis was requested from Professor Sagisaka of the Faculty of Legal Medicine of the University of Gifu, on the recommendation of Professor Okuhara of the No. 1 Laboratory of Biochemistry of Akita. Professor Sagisaka, loaded with work, sent me the results only 3 months later through the hands of Professor Okuhara in the form of a very complete certificate containing 9 articles. 1. Name of the person asking for the analysis. 2. Day of the request. 3. Object to be analyzed. 4. Content of the analysis. 5. Test with anti-human rabbit serum. 6. Analysis of blood group. 7. Explanation. 8. Analysis of blood group. 9. Results of analysis, which was given in the following words. The object examined was adhering to it human liquids. The object examined has adhering to it human liquids which belong to the blood group O. Made by the Faculty of Legal Medicine of the University of Gifu, the 30th of November, 1981. Expert Karu Sagisaka. This expert analysis is the only authentic scientific proof which we have kept with regard to the tears of the statue. It played a decisive role in the recognition of the facts, as we have already seen over and over. The phenomenon had been attributed by the First Commission to the ectoplasmic faculties of Sister Agnes. She had firmly declared that she had no knowledge of such powers, but was told that this was something from her subconscious, thus cutting short all objection. The blood group revealed by the scientific analysis was a determining factor. Sister Agnes belongs to group B. The first analysis had established that the blood which appeared on the wound of the right hand of the statue was of group B. As for the tears which flowed from the eyes, they belonged to a person of group AB, always according to the first expert analysis. As we indicated before, the inquisitor had ignored that the tears were of group AB at that time when he insisted on the ectoplasmic theory, and now, on the examination taken later, without any adherence of impurities, revealed that they belonged to group O. As one compares the first expert analysis and the second, it is established that the blood and the tears coming from the statue belong to three different blood groups. How could a human being fabricate two blood groups to which he did not belong? Is not the pure act of creation the privilege of God? God has manifested here his creative force. He first created the blood group of group B, then the perspiration and the tears of group AB, and finally of group O, as though to place an absolute and final refutation to the senseless thesis of paranormal powers invented by the detractors. I sometimes wonder if it had not been for this second expert analysis with the irrefutable scientific proof, whether the thesis of ectoplasm might not have continued its ravages, drowning all in an erroneous interpretation of the facts and abusing souls of goodwill who seek only to render homage to the supernatural action of God. The 12th of September, 1981. On September 12, 1981, the Second Commission of Inquiry, formed at the request of Bishop Ito, held its last session. At the time of the meeting, which took place in May, Bishop Ito read a provisional report written in his own hand, in which he asked for recognition of the facts. No members of the commission were openly opposed, but all decision was put off for the last meeting. In the interval, Bishop Ito received a letter from the Holy See advising him to be careful. This warning had certainly been inspired by the negative conclusion of the first commission. When the second commission was concluded, 4 members voted in favor of recognizing the events as supernatural, and 3 did not. Despite the favorable majority, Bishop Ito preferred to abstain from any official declaration authenticating the supernaturality of the events in order to remain faithful to the attitude of prudence counseled by Rome. On the morning of this same day, the statue of the Virgin wept for the 100th time. The sisters telephoned to Niigata in order that the members of the commission might be informed before their meeting. The response was, "We cannot consider the tears of the statue as a determining sign or a miracle. The supernaturality of the facts can only be recognized if more important miracles take place." There had been 100 lacrimations, and that was still not enough. The more weak the faith, the more one requires spectacular signs. However, it is impossible to recognize the supernatural nature of a fact, whatever it be, without the light of faith. The numerous miracles operated by Christ were denied purely and simply by those of the Jews who were incredulous by their disposition of spirit. It is therefore not surprising that 100 lacrimations of the statue of the Mother of Christ did not yet suffice in order that one judge it enough. In the beginning, the inquisitor, leader of the opposition, had himself declared, "1 or 2 tears do not suffice. They can be evoked by ectoplasmic faculties of someone. When the quantity will be sufficiently abundant in order that such faculties cannot be invoked, in that condition it would be convenient to believe that that comes from heaven." However, even when the statue had wept abundantly, it happened that the tears accumulated in the folds of the garment and fell even down to the globe. Those who did not wish to believe did not. The fact that a person believes or doesn't believe in the supernatural does not relate to the more or less spectacular innate character of the matter, but to the disposition of the person to believe or not believe in divine intervention in our world. In other terms, acceptance comes by faith and faith alone. A little later, the guardian angel said to Sister Agnes, "They ask a miracle greater than the tears. There will be no more." Footnote: There were to be further miracles, but the miracles of tears was to cease.